Hey, Dream Builders. Happy Sunday. My name is Logan, and I'm a part of the Unicorn Squad. I haven't hosted in a few weeks, and I know we have lots of new Dream Builders coming in every day. So, hey to y'all. And for those of you who I've already met, hey to you as well. Tonight's lesson is about something that I know we're going to have lots of questions and comments about for our guest expert. We're going to get the 411 on how money dates can transform your relationship. But first, tech test. Let me know if you guys can see me okay, and let me know if you can hear me okay. Say hello in the comments, say what's up, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, Josetta. Hey, Karen. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me? Hey, Sandy. Marie. You guys see me okay? Can you guys hear me? Okay. It looks like yes. So tonight, I'm so excited. Our guest tonight is Elle Martinez, and she is an amazing author, and she's also the host of a podcast called Couple Money. But before we even get started, I just want to let y'all know that I already got the tea and confirmed that this lesson is going to help you no matter what stage of the game you're in. So if you're already married, if you're seriously dating, newly dating, if you're just thinking about getting back into the dating game, don't worry, Elle is here for all of us. And this is a really important topic. So let me know in the comments if you have ever had difficulty getting on track with a significant other, your boo, about finances. I don't think any of my exes are watching right now, so I can definitely raise my hand on this one. And in the meantime, I'll read you Elle's bio so that she can go ahead and get started. Okay. Elle Martinez, she's the author of Jumpstart Your Marriage and Your Money, a 4-week guide to building wealth together. She is also the host of the Couple Money podcast, where she regularly invites couples into a greater understanding of their finances and the simple hacks that can help dump debt and build wealth. Hey, Elle, welcome to Ask the Expert. Say hey to the Dream Builders.
Hey, guys. How are you doing? I'm really excited about this.
Get us together on this whole love and finances thing. We're all ears.
Okay. I have to tell you that the reason I started Couple Money is because when we got engaged, we realized very quickly we had a problem, and it was finances. And I think we're not alone with that. Like, I talk to friends, family, we all seem to struggle with this. And the crazy thing is, why don't we talk about finances sooner in a relationship? Why don't we get into it? It's because we don't have any instruction. No one gives us a guide like, hey, this is how you talk about, finances. This is how you introduce a budget or debt. All those things hadn't been covered. So when we got engaged, we thought we were going to be ahead of the curve. We had a friend that we trusted who was happily married, and the advice she gave was, sit down and talk about finances. And it turned out that she was so right about it. And I think part of it, Logan, is money is not the most important thing, but let's be real. Our day-to-day has money involved in some way, shape, or form. We have the bills to have to take care of, but we also have things that we're saving up for that we want to do with our lives. Hopefully, achieve those dreams. Live a rich life includes, having your finances first secure and then start building wealth. And there wasn't a lot of resources when we start. So I think this is absolutely crucial, because if you look at the statistics, when I was researching for my book, money was either the number 1 or number 2 in numerous studies factor that led to divorce. They said that money was a source of stress. Couples were talking about money was the main reason they were fighting, and it was tearing them apart. So I'm really excited, because I think this is an important topic that isn't discussed, is how do you approach finances? And like you mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the different stages. When you're dating, how do you approach that? When you're engaged or you're serious and you're planning your wedding, how do you get into that? But what if you're already married? You've, let's be honest, had some money fights. How do you go from there? How do you kind of rebuild things, open up communication, and start working as a team with money, and more importantly, with your lives? So if you don't mind, I want to talk about first of all, why we fight about money, because I think this is something that's ignored as well. Money fights, when I was talking with couples on the podcast, our experience, I found out that it's rarely about the money, which sounds kind of crazy, but really, when we look at money, after we spend on the essential bills, right? The rent, after we take care of the groceries, the car and everything, how we spend money is a reflection of our values, our priorities that we have in life. And I think that's where it gets really sensitive with money. When we talk about money and values, what matters most to you? I know when my fiance at the time, now husband, we saw money differently. Part of it was the way we grew up, what values we had. To be honest, my mom raised us. It was 3 of us, single parent, a teacher's income. It was literally paycheck to paycheck. And the idea was, if you can afford the payments, then you're doing all right. That was just the circumstances we were in. She wasn't taking on too much debt, but she did have debt. So these were things that we picked up, whether it was consciously, unconsciously. My husband, on the other hand, was a family that they avoided credit cards. And they were basically cash. They had a family business. They tried to keep it simple. And so while he was good with saving, he had no idea about credit scores. And you and I know, Logan, especially with credit scores, it affects more than just, when you go out for a loan, it affects certain careers, your insurance, your rates in part are due to your credit score. So we definitely weren't seeing eye to eye. And when you're in a relationship, that's really hard to uncover. When we look at money, those fights, that it's the surface level, it's just a symptom. It's just a sign that there's something deeper that you guys are not connecting on. And then, of course, how do we talk about money? I see money as something to be used to get me more freedom, more options. My husband, he's a software engineer. He is more about security. How can he make sure that things are there for us? We got 2 little girls. So he's always going to be more cautious with money. And I'm always like, okay, I've read about this. Let's invest here. One of my goals in the future, I want to do some real estate investing. We're not seeing eye to eye that. And I think a lot of couples are in the same boat where you realize, wait a minute, what are our priorities? We never really kind of talked about that. How do we communicate? Where do we pick this up from? These are all these things that aren't discussed. And so that's why it's important to introduce finances in a very non-threatening, non-judgmental way. Because that's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen, is that we tend to jump into numbers, right? We look at our credit score, we're like, okay, this is pretty good, but my fiance, or, we're seriously involved, or my spouse, what's their credit score? If we're going to do something down the road, am I going to end up paying more because they have a worse credit score? Because that's what happens with finances. You're connected. So you want to make sure that you make finances less stressful and talk about it just more fun. And this sounds so counterintuitive, but one of the best pieces of advice I can give couples when you're introducing money is to not actually talk about the numbers. And so I kind of want to go, if you don't mind, 3 major milestones and some of the common money hiccups that we run into and how we can kind of work through them and talk about them. And then I want to wrap up with how money dates work in next steps. So the first one is, you guys are dating and it's getting kind of serious, but you're not right there at the commitment. You're still trying to get to know each other. This is a huge thing. I get a lot of people asking, like, I'm not married yet, we're not engaged, but this is something serious, something I think has a future, or doesn't. But how do you talk about money without seeming like a weirdo, a gold digger, or just someone that is all about, how do you say this? All about the money and not about the relationship? Because that's a fear we have, I think, especially as women, to be more proactive about money. but we shouldn't be that way. This is actually something that we can talk about, non-threatening, and build a relationship. So the first thing I want to say is when you are dating and you want to talk about money, your goal is about compatibility. Is this relationship going to go down further? You know, are we aligned with our priorities and values? And I don't think that's mentioned a lot with relationships and how finances fit into that. But if you are a saver, you are naturally trying to save towards a goal. I mean, if you're here in the Live Richer Academy, you have an ambition, you have an end goal that you are trying to achieve. Is the person you're with on the same page? Do they even have a goal? So my first piece of advice before you ask about the credit score or the budgets is, why don't you talk about the goals? What do you guys want to do in the next year, next 5 years? And something that I've seen that has been tremendously helpful for us, for many couples I've interviewed, including some couples that gotten out of $100,000 of debt, is start by modeling what you want. And I'll give you an example here. I remember when I was talking with my husband, I was talking about one of the goals I wanted to do. And it was like, you know, something I've always wanted to do was start my own business. That's something that I've had some relatives do. I think this is a better fit for me than a 9-to-5 office. You know, I see this as important. And then when you lay your goal on the line, now ask them, well, what's on your bucket list? What's going on here? And what you're looking for is you're trying to see, what are they working towards? Remember, we talk about finances being a part of our day-to-day. You can always work backwards from there, but what's the end goal? Are they, for example, they want to start a business as well? Well, that's fantastic. How long have you been wanting to do this? Find out, like, how did they get that dream? Then talk about, well, what are you doing to get there? And I think you'd be surprised. A lot of people will open up then when they know they're not being judged with finances. And it also will give you an opportunity to see if there's any red flags. Because I think that is also important to discuss with finances. Is this something that is a deal breaker or not? For example, you might be talking about they want to start a business, but right now they're in debt. Oh, I understand too. I have, dealing with a credit card debt right now, but I'm paying it down. I'm working on my car loan. When you say that, then they'll go, well, I want to start a business, but right now I'm $30,000 in student loans that I have to take care of. Now you learn two things. One, they have a goal. Two, right now, yes, they're in debt, but you know what kind of debt that is. So you see, with starting with those goals, then you can open up and kind of go down that path. Well, I'm dealing with student debt right now. I got, $5,000 I'm trying to pay off in the last semester. How about you? What are you doing? And then you're going to see if they have a plan. Because in a relationship at this point, you're serious, but you haven't made that commitment. You're deciding, is this someone who is having a plan to get out of debt? Do they see debt as something that's normal? Now, if you're trying to get out of debt and you feel like this is something that is a burden, a weight on you, and they see no problems with debt, that is a red flag, because compatibility. Don't think that when you get married, you can suddenly change them. This is something you put a pin on it for now, but this is something you need to discuss before you move forward. So I think that is a big thing when you're dating, is don't talk about the numbers. You don't have to pressure about, like, how much debt are you having? You'll get to that later. Start with the goals. What do they want to do in the next year, the next 5 years? Another way to open up the conversation, talking about work. Mention what you're doing with your job. Hey, right now I'm in this position. I'm a project manager, but in 5 years, I want to be the team lead for this department. Or if you are in a field that you're not quite happy with, this is how I'm going to pivot. This is what I'm planning to do. How about you? How's your career? What do you want to do? And this is also an opportunity to see if there's a red flag with work? Do they have any ambition? I know that sounds like a dirty word sometimes when I say that out loud, like, oh, why is she asking that? Who who is she to ask? But we as women, if you look at the statistics, are taking care of our family. We have more of a financial impact. We have to be on top of this. And for a healthy relationship, you guys have to be aligned and work together. You don't have to agree on everything, but on the main points, and finances are one of those main things. You rather know sooner than later. So that's the first one. Like, how do you introduce that? Don't jump into the credit score. You'll get there eventually, but start talking about your goals. What do you want to do? What plans do you have? And then work from there. And then yeah, go ahead.
Elle, I love this. I mean, because
Oh.
I'm speaking for the single ladies. It's so hard because it's like, you're single, you have so many things to worry about, and now it's like, okay, what's his credit score, or she, what's his or her credit score?
Yeah.
And just to so we're reframing the conversation, and people are guarded about finances, or sensitive. So it's a really tough thing to try to see if you're aligned with someone. So I just love all these tips.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's really important. I think all of us, even when we're doing better with finances, it's still a sensitive subject. We feel like, am I doing the right thing? We don't want to feel judged. And in a relationship, this is all about giving them a no judgment zone. And for yourself as well, you want to talk about this. And I do want to mention, before I talk about like when you're engaged in everything, it's very important. And sadly, I see this too much, where your partner belittles you when you're doing well. And you bring up, hey, I got this plan, I'm paying off debt, things are going well for me, and they act jealous or they belittle you. I want to say that is immediate red flag. And that's something that you should definitely address before you move forward with the relationship, because that is not healthy. Unfortunately, I've had some friends and family deal with that. And I think this is something you have to protect yourself with. So having these discussions, even, no judgment zone, give them that space, but also respect yourself and make sure you get that respect and you get that no judgment zone as well when you're talking about finances. Because I think that sometimes, we take on so much, but we also need to, receive as well. It's a give and take with any healthy relationship. So I just wanted to add that. That wasn't originally planned, but unfortunately, I've heard some people in the community, they're not getting that respect in a relationship. And if you're not at that point right now, where you're right now seriously dating, but you're not engaged, you're not married, there's no kids involved, immediately that's something you have to address before moving forward. But hopefully things are going to go well. Things are great. For all my friends who are engaged, congratulations. You have a big day coming up. I want to let you know that for the most part, a lot of couples start off on the wrong foot because their wedding day is a day that they go deep in debt for. And it becomes a source of stress for the first few years, which is that's the happiest time, it's the honeymoon phase. So I want to talk about how can you introduce finances, and again, a low-key way that is still getting you guys productively talking about finances. The key to this is communication. And what we're going to use is the wedding budget. And you don't have to use the wedding budget. If you don't want to use the word budget, that's fine. But we're going to use that as a way to open up the discussion about your wedding. The typical wedding, I've seen numbers from $28,000 to $32,000, which for most people right now is way out of their league. Instead, I want you to see your wedding as, yes, spend it how you want, but do not go deep in debt for one day. I want this to be your special day, to be a launching pad for a fantastic life together. So how do you talk about finances? How do you work, as a couple on that? Again, we talk about goals. Now we're going to be talking about the wedding. What kind of wedding do we want to have? And I know usually the ladies are typically more concerned about that, but nowadays we all have something that's important to us. My husband was the food. Like, we had to have the right food, plenty of food. I was definitely wanting the beach because that was important to me. We were living in Virginia at the time. And so we were discussing give and take. Okay. What is our budget for this special day? And this is important because if your fiance is not comfortable about talking money now, how are they going to be when you're married and you're sharing the bills, and hopefully, you're working together towards some mutual goals. So talk about that. That gives you a clue also, what are their money habits? Sometimes we're very good when we're dating, kind of hiding those things, like, hey, everything looks great. You pull out the card, but use the wedding and the budget and the planning and the saving as an opportunity to kind of get an idea. How do they handle money? Are they one of those people like, okay, if this is 6 months away or this is a year and a half away, I'm going to save up every month? Or are they one of those, I'm going to figure it out as I go? Again, communication, compatibility. We're looking at how do they handle money? What's their money style? And then also, are you compatible as a saver if they're a spender, or vice versa? There's usually room for compromise, but if you don't know where you guys stand with finances, it's incredibly hard to move forward. Also, a really interesting question. I don't suggest before you get married opening a joint checking account or anything like that. I will suggest opening a small joint savings account strictly for any cash that you might receive or money as wedding gifts that you might receive as a couple. And that's also good because that gives you an idea, okay, this is what we're doing. We're saving up for this. Do you want to spend it all on the wedding? Do you want to, some of the wedding gifts, are we going to use that for the honeymoon? Or do you have plans in the next, 5 years or down the line, whatever, down payment for a house? Again, it's going back to not the numbers, but what do you want to do with the money? And then we'll talk about, the numbers and how we're going to get there. That's very important, especially when you're engaged. You have so much going on. It is with the wedding, you got the guest list, you got all this compromise. This is an opportunity. Yes, it's a big opportunity, but do you agree on this? And also, I'm going to put a pin on this because we'll probably talk about this in the Q&A, is if there's an issue with like in-laws, boundaries, loaning money to certain in-laws, people looking back notice that certain hints were there around the wedding, planning for the wedding, especially if you have like mother and father-in-laws that are having some difficulty financially. They might promise something and then they don't follow through, or you might see some other circumstances. These are things to note. We don't pay attention because we're so busy trying to do everything. But again, your wedding can be a chance for you to get a glimpse. How do they handle finances? How do your in-laws handle finances? Because usually, not all the time, your fiance has picked up their money habits based on their parents, and it's either they do exactly the way they do, or the way they did it, they're completely 180. Like they didn't like it, it didn't work for them, and they're doing something different. Getting that insight helps you with your marriage to build something stronger, something meaningful, and something that you would be proud of and build a legacy. And hopefully, yes, it does include finances. If you have kids or if you want to give back to the community, you have to have that foundation right there.
So
and then
it sounds like at the beginning, like during the dating phase, you're more so looking at or trying to evaluate kind of like money mindset. And then as you get into the engagement phase, it's like kind of drilling down to the specifics about,
Yeah, because again, when you're dating, you're kind of getting to know each other, and we don't talk about finance, like just like you well, what are your hobbies and stuff like that, and you go out on dates. Like no one goes out on a date to look at the budget. Like, hey baby, let's budget together. We don't do that, but we get an idea, we get a glimpse of how do you view money, how do you handle finances. But then when you're planning for the wedding, this is really the nitty gritty, and I think this is kind of the first time for a lot of couples where because you have a mutual thing that you're saving and spending for, this is where you see the day-to-day. This is actually kind of what you're going to be living with when you get married. Like, okay, they could be generous. They could be very romantic, right? And they want to spend twice the budget on flowers or, the food or the venue. You got to know that. Now, I'm not saying like this is automatically a deal breaker, but wouldn't you rather know beforehand before you, if you decide to merge the finances, like, oh, my husband or my wife is a generous spender, and they spend like they treat everybody. Every time we go to the restaurants, they're buying rounds for everybody. This is why I advise, like, any chance you can get to open up about finances without, making it a judgment is important, because then it gives you a clue. And then you can always decide, is this a deal breaker for me? Or is this something we need to work on before we move forward? Or is this something I'm willing to compromise with? Because these are big issues with finances. And I'd rather people know up front than later on.
Because some of it may just be the need for education versus something that's totally not correctable.
Yes. And that's the thing. When you're working together on your wedding, you can see if you guys are compatible. Are you willing to learn from each other? I'll give you an example. I wouldn't call myself a reckless spender, but between my husband and I am the spender. But we've managed to help each other because my husband is a natural saver, but he has no sense in terms of how to spend money besides gadgets. Like he wants to, take out friends and family and stuff like that. I'm great with that. We put a budget for that. He saves for that. We work together where we're not like double dipping in the joint account. We come up with a plan where we can be generous. We can be us. We each have our own fun money, but at the same time, we're actually like building up savings and so forth. I think it's not. Don't be scared that they spend money differently than you. See if they're willing to work with you and be compatible. And when you're planning for the wedding, if they're insisting on their way all the time, if they don't want to work this out or even sit down and talk about a budget, that's a red flag too. Because sometimes if they're not comfortable talking about money now, it's going to get more stress later. If you guys have a joint savings account and a joint checking account, which it's up to you if you want to share everything, but I think you should at least have the foundation for your mutual goals and for your mutual bills. So you have to start somewhere. And I think the wedding can be an excellent opportunity for that too. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, well, I've imagined my wedding to be like this, and this is exactly how it's going to be. And your spouse could be like, oh, no, I want something bigger. Or they're more frugal and they're like, you know what, justice of the peace is good enough for me. These are things you talk about. Again, priorities and your values in finances are to a degree a reflection of that. Because my goal is for you guys to build up your finances, yes, but more importantly to me, your relationship. And so communicating is absolutely key.
I love this. Somebody find me a man.
Well, now, truthfully, though, the last one is where most of us find ourselves, which is we are married. We love our spouses, but they are driving us crazy, and we cannot agree on the budget. And typically when someone emails me or they message me on social media or tag me, it is because their spouse, their husband, wife, will not keep the budget. Like, absolutely. Either they're dragging their feet or they're resisting it, like they're breaking the budget. And a lot of times I notice it's because the couple aren't on the same page about their why. And so that's the big focus here with these conversation starters that we've been going through. It's getting to the root of this. And if you're already married, maybe you have kids already, and what you're doing is not working, there is good news. I talked to a couple. Oh my goodness, Logan, this is my favorite episode. And it was also my scariest episode because it was so it was surreal and it was insane. It was a couple. They loved each other. Obviously, they had 2 kids. They were doing well. He was making good money. She was doing well with money. They were in debt, but what they decided to do is he would handle all the finances. And if you remember my community, I say that's a big no-no. I totally get one person doing the day-to-day. I get that. That's how we do it, but we're both in on the plans. But long story short, he was the type of husband and father. He wanted to give his family everything they asked for, even if that meant that they were going deeper into debt. So every raise that he got, he thought, okay, yeah, I'll finally get caught up on the debt. And the wife, she knew they're in debt, but it was manageable, right? And then it was 2008 and the financial crisis hit. Mm-hmm. And then I remember it afterwards, but they changed the credit card rule where your minimum had to be a certain amount where basically it would make a dent. And so this is, to me, I couldn't get this. His minimum payments on his credit cards, not any other bills, minimum was like $2,500 a month for just the credit cards. And it was going to go up. And so he had to go to his wife and say, honey, I ran the numbers. I can't do this. We're going to be bankrupt in 2 weeks. $109,000 of debt. Just not counting the mortgage. And we were talking about like credit cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine 6 figures credit card? Good news is they made it. He was on my podcast. How did they survive? This was absolutely crucial. The reason was, one, they didn't have a why. Like, they did not talk about money. They felt like, okay, one of us handles it. It just was not working. They weren't on the same page. So that is absolutely what I tell married couples that are struggling to talk about money. Okay. First, again, take money off the table. Have you ever done this? I've done this before, and this actually works really well with couples, is, you know, when they talk about like the jackpots, like $1 billion, some ridiculous amount, or you hear someone who's gotten this crazy inheritance, do something like that. Like, go out on a date and for fun, talk about, like, if we had no bills, or if we won the lotto or got inheritance, whatever it is, what would we do? Like, would we travel more? Would we go volunteering? Am I going to, start this business I've always wanted or had this dream to do? Would I go back to school? Like, talk about what you guys want to do, because I think it is a very, very common thing that we get so bogged down with the day-to-day. Like, my husband and I, we have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And our day-to-day is so hectic that we kind of are just hitting all the numbers. If we didn't have like a thing we're working towards, it's very easy to kind of slip in, and you're not really going anywhere because you don't have a plan, and it's frustrating, and it usually gets reflected on our finances. So we've had years where we had a very specific dream, buying a house, or we were paying off our cars, or we were doing the basement renovation last year. And, we're talking about big numbers, $17,000 a year or $12,000 in 1 year, like crazy big things. But because we both had like this thing we were running towards, it made it so much easier to get on the same page with finances, because we knew what we wanted. Now what we did is we just went backwards and said, okay, what do we need to get there? Okay, how much do we need to save per month if we want to pay off the car? That was a huge, big win for us, and now we buy cars with cash, which is insane for a lot of people. Like, my family still doesn't understand how that works, but it can be done. And it's just a mental exercise, but it began with a dream. And then when you have the dream, then it's like, okay, well, to get there, how much do we need to get there? How do we need to get there? And then you work backwards. And that's the big key there when you're talking about that.
So it's almost like it's like you're on like turn into an adventure more, like kind of take the sting off of it.
Yeah, I say if you, okay, be honest with me. Like, how excited are you when you hear budget? Or
Never.
no, like no one's excited. But I tell you, if your budget is going to get you around the world trip for a year, like you would save enough money to travel for a year anywhere you want around the world, you get excited. Like it shifts your mindset. It tells you, okay, we are going somewhere. I think we spend money because we get frustrated. We're not going anywhere. And we feel like we aren't going to go anywhere because we're just making enough to pay the bills. So when I've interviewed couples who've paid off like six figures of debt, or I've interviewed couples who retired early with kids, which is insane, but it's doable. That was the big thing. They had a why. And the big takeaway with that was the money dates. Now, if you notice, we talked about the numbers, but all of these questions that I've brought up, these are conversations that you have on a money date that where the money is secondary. And I get into it more in my book, but a money date is talking about where do we want our money to go? And then month to month, how are we doing? We talk about the wins. That's a big part of the money date. How are we winning? We talk about reviewing that big goal. Again, keep that in front of you. What's your why? Then we look at the numbers. And then when you look at the numbers, it's much easier. Okay, we had a bad month. It happens. Again, it becomes less pressure and it becomes, okay, you know what? We went out too much because we were stressed out over work. Okay, how are we going to fix that next month? So you take away the sting of a budget. You're working towards a goal, and a budget's simply a tool to get you there. And then you plan for the next month. And then it's a date, so just enjoy the date. I think when we talk about money dates, people automatically think I'm going to tell them to bring out the spreadsheet. I'm like, please don't. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Take your wine. If you want something else, my husband likes scotch, and relax, dream together. Then you introduce the finances and build from there. So I kind of wanted to hit just the main points. I know there's a lot for the Q&A. And I'd love to tackle your specific questions. So I'd be excited to chat about that right now.
Okay, sounds good. Let me see what we have, Elle.
Yes.
Okay, so we have someone kind of with a comment, but also just saying, when you have a spouse that has no goal or aspiration, just basically that it can be very frustrating.
Oh, it definitely can be. And this is an opportunity to ask, like, what do they like to do? Like start with hobbies. Like, is there something that they like to do? Start small. Sometimes I think for some spouses, this idea of like, they have to have a big goal. They think it has to be this epic goal. Start small with with some couples, I say start small. I know we're all trying to save for like retirement, whether it's earlier, a little bit later, or becoming debt free. But what's one goal that they'd love to do? And it can be something simple, something small. And I usually say start with their hobbies, like your spouse. What do they do in their free time? Do they mess with cars? Then maybe, saving up for their dream car, see what engages them and break it down. I think, and I've been guilty of this, you kind of want to jump into like the main event, like, let's do this. Let's get debt free. Let's, retire early. And it's like, well, let's get on the same page. What are you trying to do? And that can kind of open them up.
Thank you. Let's see. Kenya is asking. So if you're already married and this is kind of long, this is kind of like the follow up, and you have suggested different ways to work on and save. What are your suggestions if there's no change?
Okay.
That's a tough
First
one.
of all, okay, that is a tough one. First of all, always make sure that your financial foundation is there. And I know it's difficult if you're not on the same page. It's going to take you a little longer to get there, but please make sure you have your financial safety net, your emergency fund, and make sure that you're caught up on bills like that. That definitely whether they're on board or not. That's non-negotiable. I want everybody to be financially stable enough. Something that's not discussed is if there's a serious problem in a relationship, um, you need to have a cushion to protect you. If you need some time off, if unfortunately I've seen in cases of abuse, you stay in a relationship, you're like, well, the reality is like, I can't go anywhere. I have no finances. So whatever your relationship, everything, please have that financial stability. Now from there, if they don't want to work on a goal, or they feel like, what I've seen is they don't see like being debt free as big of a goal as you, then this is where you can kind of take the lead and be proactive. And my buddy Tony from Debt Free Divas did this. This was impressive. They also had over $100,000 of debt. And she was like Dave Ramsey gung ho on this. Her husband said, no, I just don't see this as a big deal. And it wasn't like he was trying to drag his feet, but they had young kids. And so his argument was, well, they're only going to be young this once. Let's slow it down. And what I found fascinating for her is she kind of took this as a mental challenge with the budget of finding ways to not sacrifice the time together as a family, but to save money. And in the summer, I usually do the like $20 date night challenge, or I do like some kind of like a cheap date. She owned it. Like for a couple of years, she was owning it. And she lives in Chicago. She found everything that was like free or low cost in the community. She was hitting all the numbers. And I think that is also encouraging the relationship, is model the behavior that you want to see. And when they see you winning, sometimes that's enough to get the ball rolling. That said, if you think this is a symptom of something else, sometimes what's been helpful in an advice couple is to find a neutral third party. And two good resources. One, if you're a part of a congregation, talk to, someone you trust, someone mature, hopefully been married a few years, to kind of give you guys that perspective. And then also, if you think that this is affecting your finances seriously, consider a financial counselor. Specifically, this is a relatively new field. It's financial therapy. And I actually interviewed a financial therapist last like 5 years or so. It's just started, where they are either coming from the financial planning field or they're therapists, and they cross over and get their certification in the other. So a lot of them specialize specifically for couples who are having financial difficulties because they are not on the same page. And
That's fascinating.
Yeah, this is something new. When I started, that wasn't there. Like I didn't find any of the resources. Now it is still growing, but I think if it's serious enough, look at that. But I would say like tap into your support network. So if someone in your congregation or even a trusted friend, again, we're trying to make this no judgment, have them over for dinner, talk about stuff. You might, let them know ahead of time, hey, this is something that I'm hoping we can kind of get on the same page of. Do you mind coming over and kind of talking about that? And when you give it as a camaraderie, we're on the same team, it makes it easier. It's not going to be overnight. I do want to promise. I do want to say that I can't promise overnight, but I have noticed couples, they said, you know what? The first time was different, but I noticed something clicked. And then when I talk to them the next month, when they have their money day, they're like, you know what? It was easier to talk to them. They were more open to at least trying it out.
So kind of reframing the conversation.
It is, a lot of it is reframing.
Yeah.
Because like we talked about, we come from our own money mindset picking up. My husband, he couldn't imagine anyone doing finances differently. I couldn't imagine. It's human nature, right? What we grow up with, that's how we handle finances. But when you reframe it and you're not fighting each other, rather you're fighting the debt or you're saving towards this goal, it puts you on the same side. And that is a much easier approach to tackle whatever your goal you have. I will say something I've noticed is I have very financially savvy people, or people who are on the path and they are gung-ho. Give your partner grace. You may have drank the Kool-Aid, you're excited, it clicks for you and you pick it up. But if it takes you an extra year to get debt free, but you have your spouse on board, think about that. So if they're saying, I'm willing to get out of debt, but maybe not as aggressive as you, talk about it and see if you can find like a middle ground that makes both of you happy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, Nikia says, this is for the single folks or in the dating phase. What are some signs that you should walk away from the relationship in the dating phase versus trying to work through different, I guess, financial goals and strategies?
Okay. Definitely when you're talking about the goals, first of all, and they don't have any goals, they're evasive. That's something that you really need to discuss and figure out why. Maybe they lack ambition. I'm not saying they're a bad person. They might not be the right person for you. Like if you're a person who's ambitious, like you're in the Live Richer Academy, that tells me that you are taking seriously your finances, you have a goal that you want to work towards, then this is something that you have to seriously consider. Should we move forward? Is this going to work out? But also talk to them. I've seen a lot of, and this works both ways, guys and gals, but a lot of guys feel insecure sharing how bad they are with money, like admitting how bad it is with money. And so you want to just talk about this low key. And if he tells you it's in debt, he's in debt. Hey, a lot of us are in debt. I'm struggling with student loans. See what he's struggling with. Because I think we know, like, there's a difference if a guy tells you, he has student loans and a car loan. He made some mistakes. Like the way he talks to you, like, oh my goodness, he regrets it. Like he knows that taking on that much debt wasn't a good thing versus a guy that's like, whatever, or has a ton of credit card debt, but he doesn't even tell you how he got it. Either because he's ashamed or he's just a mindless spender. And that can be a huge problem down the road because, like, say my husband and I are married. When we were buying a house, they looked at both of our credit score, but as they explained to us, whoever had the lower credit score, that's the rates we got. Mm-hmm. So definitely, this is why it's so important to talk about finances early on. Are you compatible? And if they are in debt, how do we work together? Are you guys on this journey together? Even though, your finances are still separate because you're just dating, be a team. Like, okay, this year we're going to knock out your credit card. I'm going to knock out this credit card. You're talking about this, but if they're not even willing to work with you, I would consider that, I wouldn't call it a red flag, but I would definitely say that's a flag that you need to pause for a second and kind of evaluate your heart. Because sometimes your heart's telling you, like, and you got to listen to that.
Take it from me. Don't do it. Just kidding. Oh, gosh. Okay.
I think a lot of us have been there.
Right, exactly. So, okay, I know there are other questions, but it's about 8:54 right now, and I want to wrap up and also let you know that Elle has an amazing book. It's called Jumpstart Your Marriage and Your Money, a 4-week guide to building wealth together. That really kind of deep dives into all of these topics that she's been talking with us about. So who wouldn't like to be on the same page with their significant other in 4 weeks, right? Elle, tell us a little bit more about the book and what they will learn in it.
Sure. So besides our personal experience, I've done the podcast over 250 episodes, like I mentioned, just some of the people I've interviewed that have gone through some huge and difficult times or have had some huge wins together. And I noticed that there were patterns. And I was like, why wasn't there a book that showed, like, what are the habits of successful couples who have gotten out of debt, who have retired early? And what it does is it takes you 4 weeks. You can break it up as fast or as slow as you need to. It shows you exactly, like those money dates we talked about. I take you through your first 4 money dates, like exactly verbatim. Here's some questions to ask. Here's how you can do it. I talk about how you can automate your system and your finances. Once you guys come up with a goal, a budget based on the goal that you guys are excited about, passionate about, then how do we automate our money to make it go? So I take you A through Z. But to be honest, I know most of us are busy. So that's why I wanted to focus. What are the big wins you can have in 4 weeks? And then, of course, you can always tweak and adjust it because, like our lives and relationships, finances change. We're all in different seasons of life. So that book is designed for you as you move through the next phase of your relationship. Next phase, if you get married, how do you tweak all of this? We have kids now, or we have parents that we got to take care of. Do we need to loan money to in-laws? Like all those things are in there. We've had to deal with loaning to in-laws too. So I talk about that. How do you do that without ruining your finances and killing your spouse for giving them your money?
That sounds about right. Okay, so guys, I put the link for Elle's book in the comments, and of course, we're going to go over to the Facebook side like we always do, and Elle will still be there. She'll be able to answer questions, but also Elle is amazing, and she has a freebie to give us because the Dream Builders are so special. So we're getting a PDF, is that right, Elle?
Yes, I mentioned only a few conversation starters. This is a guide that hits all the major milestones, gives you icebreakers and conversation starters, because I know it's hard to actually start. Like, what do you say? And it makes it easier to talk about money in a, again, stress-free, no judgment zone.
Love it. Thank you so much, Elle.
You're welcome.
One more thing though, what's your website? Where else can we find you on social media? Besides, she will be, she's an instructor in the academy now, so she'll be, you'll have access to her as a dream builder, but where else can we find you?
You can find me at couplemoney.com and on social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. It's all at Couple Money. Like to keep it simple. And please tag me with your questions. I will be here tonight. And then if you're watching this later, I will definitely answer your questions as well.
Elle, thank you so much for being with us to tackle this super important topic. Guys, we're going to go over to the Facebook side like we normally do. Elle will stick around for a little while. If you guys have more questions, if you want to know more about her book, her resources, please tag her, tag Ask the Expert, no S, and we will see you on the other side. Everyone's saying thank you, Elle. This was great.
Oh, thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I want to help out.
Thank you so much, and we will see you guys on the other side. Thank you.